being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, Senator Villar. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1636 under Committee Report 213.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
This is the measure on Lifetime Cellphone Number Act. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of individual amendments, considering that this is a substitute bill. So may we now recognize the sponsor, Chair of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, and to introduce amendments, Senator Lacson, Mr. President.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized together with Senator Lacson to propose amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I introduce my individual amendment, and there's only one amendment that I'm proposing, may I seek clarification on a few issues?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand that in this proposed measure, a Globe user can move to Smart and vice versa and can still remain or retain his or her original mobile number?
Correct, Mr. President.
Yeah. And with this provision, the 4-digit prefix, say 0917, 0918,
Correct.
and so forth and so on, will no longer matter since this can be brought by the subscriber when he moves to another network?
Yes, Mr. President. This was extensively discussed during the hearing on the said bill, and the mechanism now is the mobile subscriber can now bring his number anywhere, regardless of who is the network provider. In that case, the prefix, which is 0917 for Globe and 0918 for Smart, will no longer matter because that particular number will be assigned to that particular subscriber, Mr. President.
And the prefix will no longer be reflected in all mobile calls?
It will be reflected, Mr. President, but for example, if you're presently with Globe and then you transfer to Smart, your 0917 will effectively be a Smart number.
Smart number, but even the prefix will no longer be changed?
Yes, Mr. President. Correct, Mr. President.
So my question is, and this will lead to my proposed amendment, is this: how much is the interconnection revenue, or how much in interconnection revenue does a PTE, the Public Telecommunications Entity, earn on a yearly basis in relation to the total operating revenue?
Mr. President, based on the information from NTC, Globe Telecom earned 800 million pesos for interconnection fees, Mr. President, and Smart unfortunately did not report any of their interconnecting or interconnection revenue to NTC, which is actually a very questionable. But we assume that there's a 50-50 market share for both telecom, Mr. President. So both telecom company earned approximately 800 million pesos for interconnection fees, Mr. President.
Thank you. And as a matter of fact, I have the same data as supplied by the National Telecommunications Commission with information that indeed they share on a 50-50 basis the revenue earned for interconnection charges or fees. And so, since...
Mr. President, let me just interject very quickly. I also talked to Commissioner Cabarrios yesterday to clarify this matter, Mr. President. And in the interconnection fees, which is divided into three, the national category covers the mobile phone interconnection fees. The local network category covers, apparently, according to him, the SMS and the landline. The local network category is about 2.4 billion pesos, Mr. President. So if you add the national and the local network interconnection fees, that will be approximately 3.2 billion pesos, Mr. President. But let me just clarify this and put stress on this, that the explanation of Commissioner Cabarrios was only verbal, and he was actually explaining it to us to his best of his abilities. So to be conservative about it, Mr. President, the revenues earned from interconnection will be between 800 million pesos to about 3.2 billion pesos, Mr. President.
My understanding, Mr. President, is that, and this also came from the NTC, is that national interconnection revenue, which is amounting to 806.9 million pesos in 2016, would only constitute the interconnection fee on domestic calls, including short message or SMS. No? And the international and local network would pertain to the gateway or the charges from international calls going into the network, the local network. So having said that, if we base our computation on the 806.9 million, it will be a measly 0.82% of the total operating revenue in 2016 of 98.35 billion pesos.
Correct, Mr. President.
And having said that, since it is a minuscule amount compared to the total operating revenue, this representation is proposing an amendment so as not to impose any more interconnection fees or charges for calls made from one telecommunication or one network to another. And if I may, the following is my individual amendment. May I proceed, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
On page 4, insert, because we are here to protect the consumers. And the consumers not being made aware that he is calling through a different network or PTE is helpless in being charged, with 2 pesos and 50 centavos for calls, mobile calls, and 15 centavos for SMS. And so my amendment would be on page 4, insert a new section 10 after line 19 to read as follows. Section 10, non-imposition of interconnectivity fee / charge. No interconnectivity fee / charge shall be imposed by any public telecommunications entity or PTE, open close parenthesis, PTE for domestic calls / short message service, open close, SMS, made by a subscriber after the effectivity of this act. I so move, Mr. President.
I accept, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There be none. Motion's approved.
Mr. President.
Yeah,
Mr.
another
President.
amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to just manifest that and commend the Senator Lacson for making this proposal, because, Mr. President, this is really another barrier to entry for the third-party telecom, because a lot of our subscribers are already trapped to a single network because they are avoiding interconnection fees. By removing the interconnection fees, actually it will now give the freedom to the subscriber to move around, without penalizing them for interconnection fees.
And if I may add, Mr. President, what a PTE takes in, it also gives out. Because if it charges connectivity or interconnection fee from another mobile network, it will also pay to the as expense to the other network. So it will just cancel out, Mr. President.
Yes, I agree, Mr. President. And again, just to commend Senator Lacson, with this amendment, he managed to save the consumers almost 6 billion pesos in interconnection fees. So this is actually a lot of savings to our consumers, considering that every time you call another network, you are charged 2 pesos and 50 centavos per minute. This is on top of a 7 pesos and 50 centavos per minute call.
Even on drop calls.
Even on drop calls. So this is not let me reiterate, Mr. President, it's not a one-time interconnection fee, but a per minute interconnection fee. So it's actually
so you owe me 6 billion over 100 million. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, and I commend Senator Lacson for pointing this out and making the necessary amendment, Mr. President.
Next, Mr. President, the Minority Leader. Still on the individual amendments.
Minority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the Chamber, we propose on page 3, line 30,